So good morning and welcome. My name is Steve Gordon, and I'm chair of the CHPC Education Outreach Committee. And today we welcome Ted Weatherby, who's going to talk about an application he used in a geography class to get his students interested in modeling and simulation. So I'm going to turn it over to Ted, and Ted, you can introduce yourself a bit more and take it away.
Well, thank you. Good morning. And yes, I talked to a couple people here who I've only met on video here for the first time. I'm Ted Weatherby, and I'll put a slide up in just a minute here. This is my office where the classes launch and have been for the last 2 years, and kind of in an apt happenstance, this geography course was online. It was always online, nowhere else. And so, of course, activities we could do with students who can turn off their picture and disappear and everything to get them actively engaged in some of these topics. This was always valuable. So I will start here and make sure everything else works. Please bear with me while I'm going through these. I have to close a few windows here so I'm not confused. Okay. Okay. And of course, we did these together with Elizabeth Jones, who is no longer with us. She just left this last year. It was always an online course, Geography of Disasters course, a LibEd survey course. So, of course, no prerequisites. Anybody could join in there. Okay. And of course, where we're at, you can see Minnesota. Everybody knows where that is, and a cluster around our location at the tip of Superior. We do get a few students from here and there, and apparently one from Columbus even, but mostly rural. A little map here, we probably get more students from Florida than we do from the metro area down Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's just happenstance, a rural college, a joint tribal and community college. Share our vision, unity, or union of cultures is our motto. Older students than usual, you'd see it at most colleges. A high number of veterans, about 10%. We had 50 at one time there. That is active duty National Guard. And this course, yes, 1 to 2 sections, a very popular online course. And something we knew, because it is an online course, every student has a computer. We can't say that for our regular classrooms. And of course, they could do some things online. They're all prepared for that. But disasters, you could think of volcanoes, hurricanes, floods, meteor strikes. It's a pretty broad course. But we were looking at things that are local, of local interest. And of course, interactive at all possible. We could show videos of hurricanes and fires and volcanoes forever. They're very interesting, but something they could get their hands on. And so we were looking at certain kinds of applications. This has gotten a lot easier to run these locally on your own machines, but these particular ones are more typical supercomputer apps. They had dedicated machines in Colorado or Wyoming running these to do our weather forecasts. But in some of these, they throw in a lot of little extras, like a chem module for following dust from the Sahara, and the wildfire module, which we'll talk about. Local disasters we could use, and something thought about for WRF is 1992, we had this spill, rail cars dumped into the Nemadji River, and this mystery fluid flowed out into the lake and formed very quickly this white cloud over the lake. And you could smell it in the area. It was benzene, dry cleaner fluid. And this cloud drifted across the lake and up and down and up the river, and people evacuated from all over the place. But where would it go? I mean, how was it going to affect anyone? Well, it apparent to us that civil authorities had no idea that the weather forecast wasn't very helpful on the winds, and it got us thinking about that. Could we come up with an app to do that? And of course, that's a long-term thing. We didn't know anything about writing those kinds of applications in 1992. My goodness, that would have been difficult to write on, run on computers of that day. But this does show where we are geographically, Cloquet, and of course the Fond du Lac Reservation is right next door to us. Fire that really comes to mind, and what we feature here is Cloquet is a wildfire because it's the most memorable event in this area. And in fact, it's a very apt event. The pictures I look about this particular disaster, you will see people wearing masks at that time all over the place. And it's not just from dust. There was a flu pandemic going on, was peaking just about this time, the fall 1918 World War I casualty list. And of course, this fire spread very quickly. There were actually several fires that were smoldering for days. It was dry, very little rain during the summer, and 60, 70 mile an hour winds that popped up very quickly, took people by surprise, 450 people killed very quickly in an afternoon. We're not looking to, we weren't going to recreate the fire. I think that'd be very hard to do. I'm sure that if you tried to replicate this with, say, WRF, the fire module, you would get something a little bit different every time. You know, that's just the nature of these things, and of course the terrain is represented only so fine. One thing that was inspiring on this when we were looking at WRF quite a bit later, that is around 2010, that people were producing videos online, and I'm going to show you this particular one, our inspiration here. This is designed for a larger scale fire, though. We'd say a regional fire, the side of a mountain, and that's great. But of course, you have to probably need a supercomputer to get that done in a hurry, and it takes some time to visualize that data in the end and produce these wonderful graphics, which we will show you. We were more interested in things that students could actually experiment with, a little bit of hands-on to get them so they're not just watching things. And here's a control that, in more or less, it's not the same as what we used with initial experiments with WRF fire, but what we were trying to do is a very small scale fire, using what we could do with the WRF code, a very tiny simulation on a small area to see if we could get some an activity that students could work on themselves. So this is the current control, and we'll actually start a few fires and run that, see how that works. And here's my slide to tell me to stop sharing that. And I have a web page here online. And I'm just going to share this web page here. Hopefully this shows up well. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't do well, a picture within a picture within, you know, the cascade. But this is one done by the S-Fire modeling group, and I had some interaction with them, and they were very helpful and offered to do some things for our class, in fact, for particular fires. And it is very nice. I don't know how well the action shows up there, but we can see the spread. I'm sure this took a fairly large machine over some period of time to generate, and the graphics were created after the run, no doubt, because I know how the data comes out of this code. But very nice display here. I'm going to show that one more time because I thought this was a rather nicely done video. This one was done actually later in 2017 as shown, and there's a link to it on those slides. This would be really nice if students were able to work with that directly. Just set their own and see how they spread and such. I better stop that, get rid of it before it starts playing advertisements for me. Okay. Here is one of our first experiments. I'll get that started a little bit. WRF fire run. Running on just a little machine we had in my office. In fact, about 30 minutes to generate that. Very small scale. The terrain you're seeing there is not attached to the fire data itself. We were looking more at wind direction and moisture adjustments, which we could make on WRF fire to get that to run. And visualization was a little bit more difficult. But this is designed as a large scale code. We were looking at smaller scale, so we early started working with Woodward on fluid code and such. And here's just an initial experiment. We're looking at complex terrain. It's the WRF has an interesting way of representing terrain very indirectly. And we were thinking, well, this would be nice to represent it directly. You know, the fluid goes against the terrain and rises against hills. You have chimney effects and of course, a little bit more turbulence and eddies on the surface that we are all familiar with when you sit down in front of a campfire. You know, which direction does the fire blow the smoke? Well, it depends on where you sit down, isn't it? You know, it all seems to be in your face. But this is one of the early tests in a physics-based burn code. You can see the gases pile up here in the corners. And this is a stretch grid code, unlike an embedded grid code like WRF. And we explain that to students. And here's some more modern runs from 5 years ago, that the smoke does pile up in the corners there from these. And we explain, well, that's a feature of the grid. It focus on the inner area here where it's more matched to the grid. And of course, this one burned out because we had a high moisture count. I'll pause this a minute to take a look. 10% moisture, and this is what students would see. They got 3 snapshots of the run they put in there, and then a movie. This one here, still somewhat laminar flow, and it's going to go out very soon. The high moisture count. Another one, very low percentage on moisture. So this one will actually spread, if you can see the bar. And that really is the key thing about fire danger. It has to be dry for there to be fire danger. If it's wet, you're not going to have forest fires. It just will not happen. Little campfire, which someone decided to start. And then, of course, they want to do things in neighborhoods where there's houses around. And what's going to happen there? Next to a gravel pit, a little bit more rugged terrain. You can see the little trailers where the dirt bikes and 4-wheelers there. We had to try pretty hard to get good imagery for some of these things to line up, especially with fuel categories. Elevation data is easy to get. Classification of terrain suitable for this, we had to kind of create this by hand, because it's, of course, most of this is designed for large scale models. And I will switch right here to our simulation. This is actually running right now, but I apologize a little bit. This is online for students, but those of you who know internet addresses and stuff, 10 dot, well, that's on behind our firewall. We have security issues all the time. Are you having a hard time seeing that, Steve?
No, we can see it.
Okay, that this is behind the firewall now, and some things are changing with that. But we did have this online for students from their home that they could set up runs. Simple controls, image of our location is just a set location here. This little circular region is in fact our college, and there's the freeway right next to it. Fuel category data, we did have to set this by hand. And we do know that the land around here, what is forest, grass, buildings, and such. So we could do that. It had to be match up exactly to our elevation data too. Darker, lower, lightest, highest. And of course, right here, you can see the freeway trench. Now flip to the image right away there. Yes, they didn't have to dig that trench out either. This is heavily glaciated region, moraines, eskers, artifacts from the Ice Age are everywhere. But and another control to set the wind speed. Tried to make this very simple. The directions here might not be enough there, but hey, Elizabeth described how to do this in class so we get high success. So I'll just set a little fire here, how this goes. And here's our college. And of course, right here, parking lot on the edge of it. And they can just click a little bit of JavaScript. And I can adjust the wind here a bit. You could coarse images, yeah, finer images are available, but oh, I was desperate for image matched up to the terrain. That was a little harder to get. Okay, I'm going to set a fire line here, and inspired by WRF Fire, you can set fires at spots or lines, which is very traditional. When they set back fires or test burns, they're always taking this little kerosene lamp, it looks like, and they drip fuel out on a line for their purposes. I'll set the moisture down here a little bit, simple controls. Now, something that students are going to get is a key. We did have some security here, modest security though. So we gave each student about 20 to 50 keys. They could do some runs and make some predictions and look at the results there. Okay, these are one-time keys. They're gone when they're done. And we asked them to make a comment or a prediction. Elizabeth did this directly. Well, we have a wind that is going south-southeast, a little bit of fire here in what appears to be forest. I could make sure of that. Yeah, it looks to be our forest. And with the dorms there. And the moisture, I'll stick it down there at about 3 there. I would think, of course, the fire is going to spread this direction. It's pretty flat. It's moderate wind speed. Maybe I'll have a little bit of turbulence there. So I would write some of this down to be helpful. 3% moisture. Let's see. Southeast wind at 18 meters per second. And here, behind the dorms, someone was doing a barbecue back there and had a little accident. Okay. Okay, just a little bit of feedback. This was debugging for me initially, and I just left it there. It's put on the queue, and there we go. Now, what's nice about the queue, this is a simple queue like you might see at a supercomputer center, but where you line jobs up, and you look there, and there's 1,000 jobs ahead of you, and it'll run someday. Well, there's not that many students, and they can refresh it. Tried to do nothing fancy here. The 70th image. We're going to have 60 images to combine into a movie in the end, and everybody can see it. So you can get an idea what everybody else is doing. While we're at it, let's let's just do another one. I'm just going to put a little dot there. And how about a low wind? So this probably swirl around. I have another key here handy, because they're not coordinating this. Everybody's just submitting this and that as they please, just like anywhere else. Oh, looks good. Look at the queue, and there it is. I just put it on there, and they can see the progress of the other run as that's going. Yeah, this is kind of slow, but yeah, we started off in 30 minutes, and students are a little more impatient than the researchers. They put it on there and maybe come back the next day or a week to see what is happening. But we did speed this up quite a bit. Instead of this someday it'll run whenever the chemists get done, that it will happen fairly quickly in 5 minutes. I was hoping for 2-minute runs, which is pretty good. We're talking about 2,000 steps or excuse me, 12,000 steps in an image every 20 steps. So there's quite a bit of work going on there. And I'll just put another one on there for fun. We don't have to look at it. Let's see, 9. Sorry, my typing. 2, 6. How come I was getting them? Looks good. Okay, we have some more there. We are also getting close to being done here, so, but I wanted to do one light for you. Ideally, if this was public, I would just ask a whole bunch of people, just put in your job now and we'll see what's going. Whoever's in there first, Let's say, well, I'm going to show you the comments later. That was a constant complaint. It's too slow. Well, perhaps they've been watching too many TV shows where, they need a simulation for this and that, blood splatters or explosion or something, and somehow they can get that done in about 30 minutes, and just like that, from scratch, for anything. It's just like magic. And the movie is being created, and I can actually see it on the server here. And that's done, and the next one is running, and so on. Okay, we won't stick around for that, but we can view what happened initially here. This is some junk, which I need to get rid of. Sorry about that. That was 38. And I put 6 images there so you can get a good idea what happened and initial conditions, and the students can look at that and so to maybe have an idea of what will happen and what could be interesting. And of course, there's the movie there that we saw. Well, it's not that turbulent, mostly laminar. Is it spreading? I did make a mistake when I set this thing up, though, because we're always tweaking these, usually about once a semester. I would say, well, the opacity of the fluid is just too high there. It'd be more interesting to just see the burning taking place underneath. It definitely is spreading, but I should have made that a little bit more open. But students will tell us about that too, and I will stop that for a moment here. And I'm going to share my slides again. I'm going to just try sharing the desktop here. And put this thing in presentation mode here. Okay. How did it go? And yeah, that's we did something a little bit different that I don't always do in a class. It's most of our evaluations, instructor evaluations, there's like 25 questions it's required, but there's always that little blank at the end, like any other comments, and when we get those back, you get a 25, 40 numbers, however the evaluation or survey was, and then a whole list of juicy comments on the end, which are really interesting. And sometimes they're relevant, but they're always interesting. Stop talking about your cat, or don't stand in front of the board when you're writing things. But sometimes it's like, I really enjoyed that particular aspect of the course. I wish you would do more of that. And those are the useful things to hear. And we did have a little funding at one time for this particular course. And this came from a NASA solicitation, which had this strange and wonderful little requirement that we involve students in a proposing and assessing curriculum. You must do this. And so, of course, we're going to ask students about this. And we did do that for one of these early simulations we did in class. We just kept it up because it's kind of fun and surprisingly consistent. So some questions, I did some shortcuts here. I did in the paper I put in, which is on the JOXC website, I just put the questions and answers complete, exactly as they are. Didn't have to change anything. It's a little bit raw, but I think very constructive. Yes, the consistent things they wanted: better graphics, longer movies. My goodness, can you do that? And so, yeah, technical thing, we can do that. Confusing at first, but eventually, okay, well, that's how it goes with hands-on activities. You can listen to music forever and you won't know how to play the piano, unless you actually do it. And so, yeah, that is very valuable. And of course, they kept saying that it is nice to actually do something ourselves. They wanted more and more interaction, more variables. Oh, so much work to do, but it's kind of fun work. Yeah, a little difficult at start. Well, yes, we did have directions and a work through, but I think that's, again, harping on that. You actually have to try some things yourselves. And maybe it isn't that hard once you actually see it. And yes, these are things we can do. Some we did not. It would have been nice to integrate WRF in more fully, is because, of course, you can get historical weather conditions, current conditions, and predicted conditions. It's just wonderful, the data you can get. Could you use that to drive the conditions in this simulation? Perhaps it would have essentially given us a little point interpolated from these huge 17 or 43 meter grids, which they use in our area. But we could have done that. In this case, no, it's not generally raining during wildfires. It's usually systems of drought. But we certainly did update the system. We had a new machine come in, so we could run 32 processes all at once and render the images all at once as it's running, and to get that under 5 minutes. 5 hours to complete. Well, they just had to wait 5 hours till it was done. They didn't spend 5 hours doing these things, as you can see there. But I had other comments about these things from students, like, "Oh, that's really cool. Could you do that? Could we simulate volcanoes?" Or, well, I think that's a little hard. I'm sure some geology people here could tell us about that. But I know people do it, But this was our attempt at interactivity in this course. And of course, yes, we We did speed things up. We can get that faster, and we did double the steps to get a little bit longer movie. Students want to keep it going. I mean, we want to see, can we burn the college down, or these puerile things. But and I don't think this is dangerous or anything. That when there's wildfire danger, when something will happen, you can start a fire anywhere. The results are the same. So we did act on those. The piling on around the edges, the crudity of the model. Yeah, we could have fixed that, but there's limits to what we're going to do for a classroom exercise. It's fun, but not that much fun. We do have to teach other classes, so we can enhance things a little bit from year to year. Other pieces of terrain, I did notice that there is a heck of a lot nicer data coming out about land use categories that we could use in these models, especially in big cities like Minneapolis. You can get it down to a meter in those areas. For us, not so much. Yeah, speaking to this audience here, yeah, ulterior motives, of course, yes, we have them. These are fun things to do, and working on code and programming exercises, but there is a lot of bleed through into other courses, our math courses to some degree, and of course programming courses. These are Fortran and C codes written, and you can call them up from Python, and you can whip up GUIs in Python pretty quickly. It's something I think it's very useful to do very early, and physical science applications are very nice. Science across the curriculum, yes. And of course, the geography courses. Some people who take that survey course would, of course, be interested in geography or meteorology, a few, a lot into GIS, geographical information systems. And there are practical things they could do, as far as creating imagery for us. And yeah, computational science education, not so explicit, but of course, I have an idea what it is, at least my experience, and we want them to take math courses and learn something about programming and for a purpose in the sciences, some specific applications in mind. So yeah, we are giving them some examples, and that certainly is a draw with a little bit of hands-on to get students interested in our other courses there. So yeah, if I had to do that kind of effort for every exercise for every course, it was just be impossible. But it's fun to feature those. And perhaps I got done there a little bit early, early there, but
well, let's open it up for questions. I think thank you, Ted. This was a very interesting demonstration. It was nice that you could just show us the simulations, students to see them, and so on. So are there other questions for Ted about this experience and how they created it? You can either unmute, and there aren't many of us, that would be fine.
This is Bob. So I don't mean to hijack the talk, but I just want to ask you your impression on other parts of the teaching. When I teach it at a liberal arts college in South Carolina, one of the goals I have is to teach them the concept of scaffolding or layering on how the model is built.
mm-hmm.
And using a bunch of applets that Aaron helped develop, we have these simple nearest neighbor fire models where if you start a fire, let's say, with some probability of spreading, these are the really simple models. so that, the fire spreads and they get the idea of what's the nearest neighbor fire. And that's all it does is you can change the probability. There's one parameter.
Mhm.
Then there's another one where you can go through and say, what if I want to do that, but I want to be able to change the size of the model? So now you can have a small model, you could have a medium-sized model, you can have a large model, and ask the question, does what you're learning about nearest neighbor fires change that? And so on. We have one where you can change the size and add wind. Another one where you can change the size, add wind, and also change how close the trees are to each other. But the basic idea is I'm doing a survey course like you are, where I do different topics in science and different methods of simulation. But I also want them to know how the model was built in the first place. We didn't start with the supercomputer model, with the buildings and the rivers and the terrains and the campuses. All you had was trees. Then you had trees plus something else. Then you had trees plus something else plus something else. And as you build that layering. So what I'd like to do is to figure out how to take your models and make it kind of the capstone of this very simple applet-driven set of models that I'm now using to teach about forest fires. I think that could make a much more complete unit for what I'm doing. So this is great to see.
Well, source code is. I think I gave submitted the source code for that. It's not very friendly right now. It's Fortran and stuff like that. But I could tell you that the bird model is essentially that. It's how do you set up you can't go all the way down in physics, leap twig and stuff like that. And at some point you do need a probability model. And in fact, that's exactly how that bird cone was done. That as the moisture goes down and the heat goes up, and of course you have to have a point of ignition there. That it's a probability model is kind of the core of those in this one. But I'd be delighted to share anything. It's I got to tell you, I haven't worked on this in quite a while because I'm doing other things. I really like it because Elizabeth was willing to use it in class, and I think she talked a little bit more about the fires. We did not talk as much about the modeling itself, though.
Right.
But it's certain that could certainly be built up,
Yeah, so we have this unit called Fire, Flu, and Falsehood that talks about how the fire spreads, how the flu spreads, how a rumor spreads, and look at different applications of nearest neighbor with variable probability, the same probability in each direction. With wind, you get a different probability in some directions than others. But it sounds like, what you've got the kids doing, you've got the excitement of doing something on a more powerful computer than just their little laptop.
Well,
the course I teach just assumes they have a little laptop.
Yeah, I'm sure it could be done on is pretty quickly on something. I just bought this laptop a while ago that is just amazing. It's just so tiny. It's got this embedded graphics chip in there, but it doesn't need a lot of power really anymore.
Okay.
I'm sure it would run faster on that. That they could do it themselves. The one advantage, and I still like using servers in classes, is because the material is there to share. There's this other thing we used in math class for years. It's the Sage Math. I don't know if anybody, but there's the Jupyter Labs, and they've upgraded it. But this old Sage Math thing that you can have these shared accounts, and everybody can see what everybody else is doing. That is kind of nice.
Yeah.
So I had a question.
Yes, this is Kate. Oh,
Yeah, I'm Kate. Yeah, I work at the
I've
Ohio
se-
Supercomputer Center.
I've seen you before somewhere. I didn't
No
understand.
doubt.
Uh,
um, but I was wondering, in the places where the model doesn't behave like you might expect, where the gas is kind of collecting on the edges and things,
right.
how do you kind of work with that with your students and kind of explain when models are not working the way you expect, or when it's not describing reality the way you expect, and how do they
Well,
respond to that?
well, Elizabeth did more of that explaining course. I did not teach the course. And Elizabeth left here, but yes, she explained that model, that these are stretched grids, that you have to buffer it out on the sides. We could have just simply gotten rid of that. In other words, just focused on the simulation area or made it bigger so they don't see any artifacts and it looks prettier, and the flow is kind of pretty. But yes, we just explained that. I mean, that's just the fact of life with simulations. You're going to have boundaries unless you're going to do the whole planet. Some of these simulations, you're going to have something out there and finite amount of time. So yeah, that is one comment. She explained it pretty well, because I didn't have any students complain like, get rid of those stupid boundaries, or I never seen a fire like that at pile up. Where is that? They did follow that part pretty well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it can be useful sometimes to kind of show when models, when they reach their limits and what that looks like and how to kind of interpret that and work with it, and to show that, models are approximations, and this is what it looks like when they reach that.
Well, I think the modeling too, and this is kind of highfalutin view, not going from basics, that Elizabeth talked about, that most of these geophysical problems can be simulated in some way, just ordinary weather. And we talked about models. Is a fire really going to look like that? Well, maybe for a very short period of time, but try predicting the weather. I mean, you're planning a wedding in July, and you can run WRF and you could find out exactly what's going to happen on that. It'll give you a number out to 7 decimal places or 14 even, and it's just junk. I mean, statistics are better than that, but 24 hours is great, really good. I mean, that's the part we talk about, and I know WRF is very good 24 hours. It's this fall. I don't know if anybody around the Great Lakes, but we had these fires in Canada, northern Minnesota, and the wind was kind of still, and we had these smoke coming over, and it was just choking. It's like fog in the morning. You couldn't even see the sun a few days. But the weather forecasts were just great. They were running the chem module for us, and the weather service prediction for the next day, 24 hours, was great. Next week, of course, forget it. It could be anything. But yeah, no, they love hearing about the models and that.
So where do you and the students do most of the computing? On a campus cluster or
Well,
Minnesota Center?
Well, the Minnesota is a little bit harder to get to. I mean, frankly, the Exceed machines are easier to get to from the University of Minnesota on campus. They're easier to get. Because they're set up for that, and we should hope so. They get a lot of money for it for a reason, and access is really good. But this could be run on a remote machine, but I just have to say the access is a little bit tougher on a remote machine than it is for a local machine on campus. That's just the fact of life. I mean, this little machine cost $5,000 at the time. It's like a Stampede tube node. It's a kind of boat anchor now anymore. I mean, it's not good for anything else. It's just that. But it is local, and they can run things instantly on it. And I just don't know how it'd be using Exceed on a class. I know they give you an education allocation just like that. Just fall over themselves to make everything available and help and everything. But the mechanics of getting students on there and running that, visualizing it, it's the web interface is very, very nice. You know, you can just lib-ed students, a lot of nursing students, law enforcement, and we get some of them to see the light and go into the sciences now and then. But you know, I think it's very valuable for law enforcement and nursing to know something about this too. But they're not going to have a lot of background. They know how to do everything on a browser. I think it would be interesting to use Exceed or as just, well, this is how you use a supercomputer. I have a feeling they might be disappointed though, in a way, because, you know, I don't mean disappointed, but you know, some of the mechanics of putting in passwords, second key authentication and queues and stuff, that can lose excitement real quick, you know, if you're in a hurry to get things done. It works very well, you know, that's for sure.
So I'm curious how you managed to get students from so many locations across the country.
I don't know. That is an odd thing. We were keeping a list of foreign students too at one time. You know, it's well, athletics. That's one thing. It's just an oddity of community colleges, and I'm sure some people like at Ohio State are well aware of this. That you get a lot of highly skilled football players from community colleges. Okay, because you say you're a quarterback, you could start at a community college.
But were they attending the class from those locations?
No, they're here. They're here.
Oh.
They came here. We're not advertise. We do advertise online, and they could take online courses anywhere, and many do. I'm sure they did during COVID-19 times, but it's most of those students from around the country are actually here on campus.
Good clarification. I wasn't certain.
Yeah, it's, well, we're not trying to compete with Ohio State or anywhere else, you know, as far as online, or like MIT just essentially did it. Many of these things years ago. Here, it's free, you know, and that's fine. We can offer a little more personal touch versus a highly automated interface there, you know.
And are you getting students from the tribal college part of the college?
Well, yes, we are Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College. This is the tribal college, and it's a community college. So yes, this is the tribal college. So yeah, but pretty local. That map is a little bit deceiving. You get students from Texas. Well, some from larger cities, but I'd say mostly rural.